General Crevasse, the leader of the Jewel hunting party, stood on the bridge of his ship, his eyes narrowing as the verdant world came into view. His reptilian body was covered in pulsating with organic energy, his talons clicking impatiently as he observed the human colony from afar. "This is the place," Crevasse growled, his voice a deep, rumbling snarl. "The humans have settled here, unaware of the hunt that is about to begin." Around him, the other Jewel warriors hissed and clicked in anticipation. They lived for this, the thrill of the chase, the moment when prey realized it was hopeless. Crevasse had personally led hunts across dozens of worlds, and each time, the humans had fallen quickly. They were clever, yes, and their technology made them dangerous, but they lacked the primal instinct to survive against a true predator. "They won't last long," one of the Jewel soldiers, Gareth Cor, sneered, his elongated fangs glistening. "These humans rely on their machines too much. Once we disable their tech, it will be over in hours." Crevasse allowed himself a predatory smile. He enjoyed the hunt, but he relished the fear in his prey even more. There was something satisfying about watching a species realize that no matter how far they'd come, they were still prey at heart. "Prepare the landing party," Crevasse ordered. "We take them alive if possible. We hunt them if they resist." The Jewel soldiers clicked in unison, their movements fluid and powerful. Each one wore armor equipped with advanced cloaking technology, energy weapons, and biomechanical enhancements that made them stronger and faster than most species in the galaxy. They were the perfect hunters. As the Jewel ship descended into the atmosphere, a warning beacon sounded in the human colony. The colony's commander, Captain Mila Sandoval, stood on the observation deck, her brow furrowed as she watched the screen. "Unidentified ship entering atmosphere," the automated voice repeated. The colony's sensors had picked up the Jewel vessel moments earlier, but now it was too late to flee. Mila knew that whatever was coming, it wasn't friendly. "Get me a visual," Mila ordered, her voice steady despite the rising tension in the control room. Around her, the human colony's small militia scrambled to their posts, checking weapons and fortifying defenses.
The display flickered and the image of the Jewel ship appeared, its black hull gleaming ominously as it descended toward the jungle.
"Jewel Dominion," the officers muttered, fear creeping into their voice. "We're no match for them." Mila clenched her jaw. She had heard of the Jewel. Stories of their hunts, their brutal conquests, had spread through the outer colonies. They were apex predators, and they didn't come for diplomacy.
"They won't give us the chance to surrender," Mila said, her voice tight. "Prepare the evacuation." "But Captain," another officer said, her voice shaking, "we don't have the firepower to fight them off. We barely have enough for self-defense." Mila knew it was true. The colony had a small defense force, mostly light infantry and a few automated turrets. It was enough to handle the occasional wildlife attack or rogue mercenary, but not an elite hunting party from the Jewel Dominion. Their technology alone would outmatch anything the colony could muster. "We're not fighting them head-on," Mila said, her mind racing. She knew that the Jewel would expect the humans to rely on their technology, but that was exactly what they couldn't do. The jungle outside was thick, hostile, and unforgiving. The terrain would be their ally. "We're going into the jungle," Mila declared, her decision firm. Her officers looked at her in disbelief. "The jungle? Captain, the predators out there are as dangerous as the Jewel." Mila's eyes hardened. "I know, but we can't fight them with our tech. Not on their terms. We'll use something they won't expect." She took a deep breath, recalling something she had learned from her ancestors. An ancient technique that had been used before humans had machines, before they had weapons. It was primal. It was risky, but it was their only chance. "We'll use persistence hunting." Her officers exchanged confused glances. Most of them had never heard of such a hunting against the galaxy's most feared predators. Mila turned to the display showing the dense, sprawling jungle that surrounded the colony. "We'll run. We'll keep moving. We'll exhaust them." "But Captain, they're faster than us," one of the soldiers objected. "They're faster, but they're not built for endurance," Mila countered. "If we can keep them moving, we can outlast them. The jungle will slow them down. Their tech will only take them so far. We'll turn this hunt against them." There was a moment of silence as her words sank in. The plan was dangerous, but so was standing still and waiting to be hunted. Mila looked each of her officers in the eye, challenging them to believe in the plan. "We're humans," Mila said, her voice rising with determination. "And if there's one thing we're good at, it's surviving. We won't give them the fight they expect. We'll give them a fight they can't win." Her officers nodded, their fear replaced with a grim sense of resolve. The humans quickly gathered their supplies, abandoning anything that would weigh them down. They knew they couldn't afford to stay in one place for long. As they moved out into the jungle, the sound of the Jewel ship's engines roared overhead. The hunt had begun, and for the first time, the hunters had no idea what they were walking into. The dense jungle of Nerissa Prime swallowed the fleeing humans like a living beast. Towering trees with thick, twisting vines formed a natural canopy overhead, casting everything in a greenish twilight. The air was heavy with moisture, the smell of damp earth and strange flora filling their lungs. Underfoot, the ground was uneven, littered with roots and undergrowth, making every step a challenge. Captain Mila Sandoval led her team deeper into the wilderness, her eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of movement. Behind her, the small group of colonists and soldiers moved as silently as they could, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. They carried only the essentials: light packs, water, a few rations, and basic weapons. There was no time to stop and plan. They had to keep moving. "We'll set up camp soon," Mila whispered to Corporal Davis, her second in command, who was sweating profusely as he tried to keep up. "Are you sure they won't catch up with us?" Davis asked, his eyes wide with worry. "They're predators, Captain. They can track anything." Mila's gaze hardened. "They're predators, yes, but we're not prey. Not anymore." As they pushed further into the jungle, Mila reflected on her decision. Persistence hunting, an ancient method humans had once used to outlast stronger, faster animals. It wasn't about speed or strength, it was about endurance. Back on Earth, humans had been able to run for miles without stopping, chasing their prey until it was too exhausted to fight back. This was the only advantage they had against the Joule. Suddenly, a soft crackle came through Mila's earpiece. The voice of one of her scouts, Private Morales, cut through the static. "Captain, I've got eyes on them. Joule hunters, 5 clicks behind us. They're on the move, fast." Mila cursed under her breath. "How many? 6? Maybe 7? Armed with energy rifles and cloaking tech. They're moving in formation, like they're hurting us." "Understood. Keep an eye on them. Do not engage. Just keep them in sight," Mila ordered. She turned to Davis. "We need to break their formation. If they're hurting us, they're planning to corner us." Davis frowned. "How? They can cloak, and we're out in the open here." Mila smiled grimly. "That's the point. We'll force them to spread out. If we're too fast for them to herd, they'll have to adapt." With a quick hand signal, Mila motioned for the group to split into smaller teams, each taking a different path through the jungle. The colonists hesitated at first, unsure of the strategy, but Mila's commanding presence inspired confidence. They obeyed, their steps quickening as they vanished into the undergrowth. The jungle came alive with movement. The Joule, still cloaked in their advanced armor, followed in pursuit, unaware that they were no longer tracking one group but many. The humans were splitting off, zigzagging through the dense foliage, doubling back and crossing over their own paths to confuse the hunters. Mila moved with purpose, her senses sharp. The jungle was humid and the air thick with the buzz of insects. The further she moved, the more distant the sounds of her team became. She could hear the faint rustle of leaves as the Joule closed in behind her. "Private Morales," Mila whispered into her comm. "What's their position now?" There was a pause, then Morales' voice crackled back. "They're scattered. I think they're confused. 2 of them broke off to follow one of our teams, but the others are sticking close. They're not used to prey moving like this." Mila allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Keep watching." The Joule were expert hunters, but they relied too much on their tech, on cloaking devices and energy weapons. They weren't prepared for a chase like this, especially in terrain as unforgiving as Nerissa Prime's jungle. Their heavy armor would eventually slow them down, and their advanced sensors would struggle in the dense foliage. That's when Mila heard it, a faint hum, almost imperceptible at first, but growing louder with every passing second. Her instincts kicked in just as a flash of movement streaked through the trees. The Joule had found her. Mila dove behind a tree just as a bolt of energy scorched the ground where she had been standing. The air crackled with electricity, and the smell of burning ozone filled her nostrils. "Morales! They're here!" Mila hissed into her comm as she crouched low, her eyes scanning the jungle for any sign of the hunter. There was a shimmer in the air, a distortion that signaled the Joule's cloaking tech. Mila's heart raced as she tried to pinpoint the source. The jungle was full of hiding places, both for her and for her enemies. Another bolt of energy sizzled past her head, narrowly missing. Mila gritted her teeth, pulling out her sidearm. She fired in the direction of the distortion, but the shot went wide, hitting nothing but trees and foliage. She couldn't outrun them forever. She needed to outlast them. "Let's see how you handle a real hunt," Mila muttered to herself, her eyes narrowing as she slipped into the dense brush. The Joule moved with predatory grace, but Mila was no easy target. She kept her pace steady, her breathing controlled as she navigated through the jungle. Every step was calculated, every turn designed to confuse and frustrate her pursuer. She knew that if she could keep moving, if she could stay just out of reach, the Joule would tire, and once they did, they would make mistakes. Mila could hear the heavy footfalls of her hunter now, the creature's frustration mounting with every failed shot. She wasn't running. She was pacing herself, conserving energy while forcing the Joule to chase her. This was persistence hunting in its purest form. Suddenly, Mila heard a shout over her comm. "Captain, Morales here. They've lost sight of us. The hunters are slowing down." Mila grinned. It was working. "We regroup at the waterfall," she instructed, her voice calm and confident. "We'll make our stand there." As Mila continued through the jungle, she could feel the shift in the air. The Joule had underestimated their prey. They had expected a quick and easy hunt, but now they were the ones being tested, and for the first time, The Jewel were starting to realize that humans didn't quit. The roar of the waterfall grew louder as Captain Mila Sandoval reached the designated rendezvous point. The massive cascade spilled over jagged rocks, its mist rising up like a cool breath in the oppressive jungle heat. She paused, catching her breath and scanning the surroundings. This would be their battleground, a place where the terrain would be their ally, not the enemy's. As the other teams emerged from the jungle, their expressions were a mix of exhaustion and steely resolve. The Jewel were still tracking them, but the humans had gained ground, and more importantly, the Jewel were losing theirs. Corporal Davis was the first to reach Mila's side. He was covered in mud and sweat, but his eyes gleamed with determination. "They're still coming," he said, leaning against a tree. "But they're spread thin now. We've led them on a wild chase." Mila nodded. "Good. The more we divide them, the better our chances." Private Morales and the other survivors filtered in shortly after, each one glancing back over their shoulders, as if expecting the Jewel to emerge from the trees at any moment. The tension was palpable, but there was also something else: hope. For the first time, the humans weren't just running, they were setting the terms of the engagement. "We can't stay here long," Morales warned, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "The Jewel might regroup faster than we expect." Mila agreed, but she knew they had to hold this position long enough to prepare their next move. "We'll use the waterfall to our advantage. Its sound will cover us, and the terrain is rough. It'll slow them down." She motioned to the steep, rocky incline that bordered the falls. "We can funnel them into a choke point here. If they follow us, they'll have no choice but to engage us directly." Davis raised an eyebrow. "And what if they use their cloaking tech to sneak up on us?" "They won't," Mila said confidently. "Not after the run we just put them through. Cloaking burns too much energy. They'll be conserving power by now. The longer this drags on, the more desperate they'll become." The group fell silent as Mila's plan began to take shape. They weren't going to fight the Jewel on the aliens' terms. They were going to force the predators into a battle of attrition, where human endurance would be their greatest weapon. Technology was useless when you couldn't keep up with your target. Suddenly, a distant rustle echoed through the trees. Everyone tensed. "They're close," Morales whispered, his grip tightening on his rifle. Mila raised a hand, signaling for silence. She could feel it too. The Jewel were nearby, closing in fast, but they were no longer hunting as a cohesive pack. The humans had disrupted their rhythm, and now, instead of stalking silently, the Jewel were rushing, eager to end the hunt. "They're overconfident," Mila murmured under her breath, barely audible over the roar of the waterfall. "Let's make them pay for that." The humans took their positions. Some crouched behind rocks and trees, weapons at the ready, while others hid in the foliage, prepared to ambush the Jewel as soon as they entered the choke point. Every muscle was tense. Every heartbeat quickened in anticipation. The jungle around them was eerily still, save for the ever-present sound of the waterfall crashing down. Then, like shadows emerging from the underbrush, the Jewel hunters appeared. Their cloaking devices flickered weak, no longer able to hide their hulking forms entirely. They moved with the predatory grace of a species bred for hunting, but there was a subtle difference now, a hint of frustration, of anger. They had been pushed harder than they were used to, and it was starting to show. And the first Jewel to step into the clearing was met with a sharp crack as Morales fired his rifle. The shot struck true, hitting the alien in the side. The Jewel staggered, its blood spraying across the rocks. It let out a guttural snarl before collapsing to the ground. "Now!" Mila shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The humans opened fire in unison, their weapons blazing as they unleashed a hail of bullets and plasma shots at the Jewel. The aliens, caught off guard by the sudden ambush, scrambled to take cover behind the trees and rocks. Their cloaking devices flickered as they tried to blend into the environment, but the humans had learned to track their movements by sound, by the subtle shift in the air, and by the tremors in the ground. Davis, crouched behind a boulder, grinned as he spotted a Jewel trying to flank them. With a quick, practiced motion, he lobbed a grenade toward the alien's position. The explosion sent a shower of dirt and leaves into the air, and the Jewel was thrown back, its body crumpling lifelessly to the ground. Mila fired in controlled bursts, her shots precise and calculated. She knew they didn't have the firepower to overwhelm the Jewel directly, but they didn't need to. Every shot, every movement was designed to wear the predators down, to force them into a battle they weren't prepared for. The Jewel retaliated, firing their energy rifles in sharp bursts, but their aim was wild, frantic. The humans were too quick, too elusive. For every human they managed to wound, 3 more Jewel fell. The battle was turning, and the hunters were beginning to realize that they were no longer in control. "They're breaking!" Morales shouted over the din, his eyes wide with disbelief. "We're actually winning!" Mila didn't let herself feel any sense of victory yet. The Jewel were powerful, even when weakened, and they could still turn the tide if given the chance. Suddenly, a jewel hunter burst from the trees, its massive frame barreling toward Mila with frightening speed. Its cloaking device sputtered out as it raised a gleaming blade, intent on cutting her down. Mila's reflexes kicked in. She ducked under the swing, narrowly avoiding the blade's deadly arc, and rolled to the side. In one swift motion, she drew her knife and plunged it into the jewel's exposed side. The alien roared in pain, staggering back, but Mila didn't stop. She twisted the blade deeper, then pulled it free, watching as the jewel collapsed to the ground. Panting, Mila stood over the fallen predator, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a test of wills, and the humans, with their primal instincts and unyielding determination, were winning. The Zul, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat, their once fearsome formation now scattered and broken. They had come to Nerissa Prime expecting an easy hunt, but what they found instead was something far more dangerous. A species that didn't rely on technology or brute strength to survive. A species that used its mind, its endurance, and its unbreakable spirit to turn the tide. As the last of the Zul vanished into the jungle, Mila signaled for her team to regroup. They were bruised and bloodied, but alive and victorious. "We're not done yet," Mila said, her voice steady but firm. "They'll be back, but next time, they'll know what we're capable of." Davis nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Let them come." For the first time in days, the humans weren't running. They were standing their ground. The jungle had gone quiet. Too quiet. Captain Mila Sandoval crouched behind the dense foliage, watching the tree line ahead. The jewel had fallen back, but she knew they weren't finished. The apex predators of the galaxy didn't retreat unless they had a plan, and Mila had no intention of being caught off guard. "They're regrouping," Corporal Davis whispered, keeping his rifle steady as his eyes scanned the surroundings. "Trying to bait us into chasing them." "Let them regroup," Mila murmured. "They're learning that brute strength and technology won't win them this fight, but we need to be smarter than they are." The humans were battered, bruised, and tired, but they had something the Zul didn't: the ability to endure. The alien predators, for all their advanced tech and physical prowess, had never experienced a hunt like this. They were used to quick, efficient kills, but now they were being hunted in return, slowly worn down by the relentless pursuit of their human prey. "They'll come back in force," Private Morales added, his voice low. "I bet they'll try to use the terrain this time, trap us between the cliffs." Mila nodded. "That's exactly what they'll do, which is why we're going to force them into a corner before they can box us in." Her team gathered closer, their faces set with determination. They had been running for days, but now, for the first time, they had the upper hand. The Zul weren't invincible, and the humans had proven that through sheer grit. The trick now was to finish the job. "We've drawn them out, and we've hit them where it hurts," Mila continued. "Now we force them into a final confrontation on our terms. We know the terrain better than they do. We're going to lead them into the highlands, where their technology is all but useless." "Highlands?" Davis frowned. "That's a death trap. The cliffs are steep, and there's no cover once we get up there." "Exactly," Mila said, her eyes glinting with a dangerous edge. "We're not going to use cover. We're going to use ourselves." The team exchanged uneasy glances, but they trusted her. They had to. Mila's plan was bold, maybe even reckless, but it was their best chance of turning this into a victory that the Jewel would never forget. A victory that would shake the entire galaxy. "They expect us to keep running," Mila explained. "They think we're cornered. Desperate, but we're going to turn that desperation into our weapon." As night began to fall, the humans moved through the jungle, sticking to the shadows and using the dense vegetation to mask their presence. The Jewel were out there, somewhere, trying to regroup and prepare their final strike, but they wouldn't be expecting what was coming next. The highlands loomed ahead, their rocky cliffs and jagged peaks rising like dark silhouettes against the sky. The terrain was unforgiving, treacherous even, but it was exactly what Mila needed. Up here, the Zul's tech wouldn't help. The elevation and rough terrain would interfere with their scanners and cloaking devices, leveling the playing field. As the team reached the base of the cliffs, Mila signaled for them to spread out. They took up positions along the natural choke points, each soldier blending into the landscape. The plan was simple: bait the Zul into pursuing them up the cliffs, where their speed and agility would be useless, and then wear them down with persistence. "Once they're in range, we don't engage directly," Mila reminded them. "We keep moving, force them to follow us. They'll get tired, and when they do, we strike." The humans waited, their breath steady, their hearts pounding in anticipation. They could feel it in the air. The Zul were coming. And then, from the depths of the jungle below, came the unmistakable sound of movement. The Zul had taken the bait. "They're here," Morales whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. Mila nodded, keeping her gaze fixed on the trees below. She could just make out the faint shimmer of a cloaked Zul warrior moving between the shadows. They were trying to stay hidden, to catch the humans off guard, but it wasn't going to work. "Wait for my signal," Mila murmured, gripping her rifle tight. Not yet, not yet. The Joule advanced, their movements cautious and deliberate. They thought they were the hunters, but Mila knew better. The humans had led them here, into this unforgiving landscape, for one purpose: to break them. Finally, when the Joule were within range, Mila gave the signal. Now! The humans opened fire, their shots ringing out across the cliffs. The Joule were taken by surprise, their cloaks flickering as they scrambled for cover. But there was no cover to be found. The highlands offered nothing but sharp rocks and steep drop-offs. The Joule tried to push forward, but the humans didn't stay in one place long enough to be cornered. They fired in short bursts, then moved, forcing the aliens to give chase. Every step the Joule took up the cliffs cost them more energy, more stamina. They were fast, but they weren't built for endurance. "We're wearing them down," Davis called out, a grin spreading across his face as he fired another shot. "Look at them, they're slowing." It was true. The Joule, for all their strength and speed, were beginning to tire. Their movements grew sluggish, their attacks less coordinated. They had never experienced a hunt like this, where their prey refused to quit, refused to be caught. Mila kept her team moving, her mind focused on the goal. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to the Joule and to the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated, that their willpower, their endurance, was a weapon more powerful than any alien technology. As the Joule's advance faltered, Mila saw her chance. "Move in!" she ordered, her voice sharp with determination. The humans surged forward, their rifles blazing as they descended on the exhausted Joule. The aliens, once so confident in their superiority, were now on the defensive. They tried to fight back, but it was too late. The humans were relentless, their strikes precise and unyielding. In the chaos, Mila found herself face to face with the Joule commander, a massive, hulking figure clad in sleek alien armor. Its yellow eyes glowed with fury as it lunged at her, a blade gleaming in its hand. Mila dodged the attack, her movements swift and calculated. She wasn't faster than the Joule, but she didn't need to be. She just needed to outlast it. The commander snarled, swinging its blade again, but Mila was already moving. She ducked under the strike and drove her rifle butt into the alien's side, sending it stumbling back. "You're tired," Mila said coldly, leveling her rifle at the Joule. "And we're just getting started." With a final deafening shot, the Joule commander fell, its body collapsing to the ground with a heavy thud. Mila stood over the fallen predator, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but her eyes burning with triumph. The humans had won. The Joule were finished, their forces broken, their will shattered. They had come to Nerissa Prime as apex predators, but they had been undone by a species they had once considered prey. Mila looked up at the sky, where the stars glittered like 1,000 distant eyes, watching. "This is what it means to be human," she whispered, "and the galaxy would never forget it." The dawn broke slowly over the highlands, the first light revealing the aftermath of the battle. The rocky terrain was littered with the bodies of fallen Joule warriors, their advanced armor cracked and scarred by the relentless human assault. Smoke still curled from a few smoldering fires, and the air hung heavy with the scent of burnt ozone and alien blood. Captain Mila Sandoval surveyed the scene from atop a rocky outcrop, her body aching from the relentless pursuit, but her mind sharp and focused. Her team, battered but victorious, moved among the ruins of the Joule camp, collecting gear and securing the perimeter. They had done it against the galaxy's most feared predators. They had proven that humans weren't just prey, they were survivors. Warriors who could outlast and outfight even the most powerful enemies. Corporal Davis approached her, his armor dented but his spirit intact. "Highlands are clear, Cap. No sign of reinforcements. The Joule pulled everything into that last charge. They didn't expect us to turn the tables like that." Mila nodded, but her eyes were fixed on the horizon. They thought their strength would win the day. They didn't understand that strength comes in more forms than just physical power or advanced technology. Endurance, determination. Those are our strengths, and they couldn't see that. Private Morales joined them, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, but his grin unshakable. "You should have seen their faces when we kept coming, Captain. They thought we'd run, that we'd break, but we didn't stop. Not once." Mila allowed herself a rare smile. "That's because humans don't quit. It's something they'll remember, something the whole galaxy will remember." The Joule had been the apex predators, revered and feared across the stars for their brute strength and predatory instincts, but they had never faced anything like this before. They had never encountered an enemy that didn't rely on power alone, but on persistence, adaptability, and the sheer will to survive. Mila knew that the stories of this battle would spread far and wide, shaking the foundations of the galaxy's belief in who truly held power. "We've sent a message," Mila said, her voice steady, "not just to the Joule, but to every species that thinks we're weak. We've shown them that no matter how advanced their technology, no matter how strong they think they are, they can't outlast us." "Think they'll come back?" Morales asked, his gaze turning to the distant tree line, as if half expecting another wave of Joule warriors to appear. "They won't," Mila replied, her tone resolute. "Not after this. They underestimated us, and it cost them dearly. The Joule live by one rule: never fight a battle you can't win. After today, they'll never challenge humans again. Davis chuckled dark. Guess they learned the hard way what it means to mess with humanity. But as they stood there, basking in the hard-won victory, Mila knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and while the Joule had been humbled, there were other species, other empires, who would hear of this battle and be tempted to test humanity's limits. "We need to be ready," Mila said, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't the last time we'll have to prove ourselves. Others will come. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they'll come." "Let them," Morales said, his grin returning. "We've got plenty of fight left." Mila didn't respond, but her heart swelled with pride. Morales was right. Humanity had faced extinction before and had survived through grit, tenacity, and a refusal to back down. It was that same spirit that had won them this day, and it was that same spirit that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. "Captain!" a voice called out from behind them. It was Lieutenant Green, rushing up with a datapad in hand. "You're going to want to see this." Mila frowned, taking the datapad and skimming the report. Her eyes widened as she read the contents. "It's a transmission from the Joule," Green explained, his voice edged with surprise. "They're broadcasting to their fleet, surrendering." Davis's mouth fell open. "Surrender? The Joule don't surrender." "They do," Mila said quietly, her heart pounding. "They've realized they can't win this war." It was unprecedented. The Joule, the undisputed apex predators of the galaxy, were surrendering to humanity. And not because of superior weapons or overwhelming force, but because humans had outlasted them, had broken their will. "Send a response," Mila ordered, handing the pad back to Green. "Tell them we accept their surrender, and tell them this: humanity is not to be underestimated again." As Green moved to carry out her orders, Mila looked back at her team. They were tired, bruised, and dirty, but they stood tall, their eyes bright with the fire of victory. "We've changed the galaxy today," she said, her voice low but filled with pride. "Not with technology, not with power, but with something they never saw coming." Davis grinned. "Persistence hunting." Mila nodded. "Exactly. They thought they were the hunters. They were wrong." As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light over the rugged terrain, Mila knew that humanity's future had just been rewritten. No longer would they be seen as the underdogs, the weaker species. They had proven that strength wasn't just about brute force. It was about heart, endurance, and the will to keep going when others would fall. And the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again.